which is titled We the People of the States of Bharat. It is a book that looks at the reorganization of Indian states after 1947 from the point of view of linguistic reorganization. Before I move forward, I would request people sitting at the back to kindly come and occupy the front rows, please. If people sitting in the back can please come and occupy the front rows, please. Let me briefly introduce the panelists here. We are in the presence of Professor Rudrangshu Mukherjee, who is the Chancellor of Ashoka University. He received his DPhil from Oxford University in 1981. He is a renowned historian and author. He has taught history at the University of Calcutta and held appointments at Princeton University, University of Manchester, at University of California, Santa Cruz. He is an internationally acclaimed historian and who has written on the revolt of 1857. The book is titled Awadh in Revolt. He has also edited a lot of anthologies on modern Indian history. The most outstanding, according to me, is the one that talks of Indian Ocean being the center point of modern Indian history. With him is Dr. Sanjeev Chopra, the curator of The Value of Words, who's a retired civil servant of the 1985 batch. He's now the primary patron and honorary consultant of the Literature Festival, The Value of Words. He's the former director of the Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy of Administration. He has been in charge of, as the additional chief secretary to the government of West Bengal. Without wasting much time, I'll give the mic to Dr. Sanjeev Chopra, to Dr. Mukherjee.
Sanjeev, I first must confess I haven't finished reading the entire book, but as I say, as one says, I glanced through it, large chunks of it I have read. So it's subject of obvious importance, and without the making of the Indian states, there wouldn't have been a union of India. I think I'm not making an exaggeration. So when India became independent, or as the British still like to say, when the transfer of power took place, there were more than 500 royal principalities of various shapes and sizes, some nearly as big or bigger than Britain, like say Hyderabad, and something as small as a large polo field, Pataudi. These all had to be brought into India or into the two nations that had been created by this bizarre process of transfer of power. So by bringing these various territories under the umbrella of the Republic of India and what was then the Republic of Pakistan, the two nations were actually made, but we are not concerned about Pakistan, we are concerned about our own country. This is how India was made, and it was a process of tortuous negotiation, a process sometimes of voluntary association, sometimes of military engagement, and sometimes, most bizarrely and most uniquely, sometimes of a non-resolution as well. And it remained, that non-resolved parts remain a major thorn in the side of the Indian Republic and of disputes between India and Pakistan. So after that, after the Union of India has been formed by the stupendous effort of Vallabhbhai Patel and his very, very able uh, Deputy VP Menon, um, another process began. That is, how were these provinces that had been formed, which was a legacy of the British Empire, how these provinces were to be retained, what kind of character would they be given, and what would be the basis of that character, what would form the identity of these provinces. This also, the identity of the provinces is also a legacy, not just of the British Empire, but also the Indian national movement, because when Gandhi began the process of reorganizing the Congress, uh, by transforming it from what was very politely called, or not so politely called, an annual tea party of westernized oriental gentlemen into a proper political formation, a political party around 1917-18, when Gandhi began the process of linking the block level Congress to the provincial level Congress to the national level Congress. He also brought in this idea that the various provincial congresses would be organized around linguistic lines. So that's another legacy that the Republic of India, the Union of India inherited. And all these played a part, and uh, even subsequent to that, in our own living memory, this process of reorganization of the states of India continues, with new states being born out of old states that already existed. The last one being Telangana, which was born out of that existing state of Andhra Pradesh, which itself was a product of the original royal state of Hyderabad. So, Sanjeev, would you take us uh, briefly through this very tortuous process of the reorganization of the states?
Thank you so much, Professor Mukherjee. You see, one of the things that comes to mind is that there were four people who played a very important role in the making of India. We've discussed Mahatma Gandhi, Patel, Ambedkar, and Nehru. Now, one thing, I mean, they all had very different conception of the country. I mean, Gandhi was looking at a village republic and Swaraj type of a thing. Ambedkar wanted a very strong state. Patel also wanted a very strong state. Nehru was very dreamy-eyed about, about the ICS and many other things. But the one thing on which they all four agreed was that there has to be the linguistic reorganization of states. And the Congress had decided upon this in 1918. 1916, 17, 18, and they'd already got their own, the Sindh Congress and the, Maratha Congress and the Gujarati Congress. So in a way, there was no question of not having provinces or states based on linguistic lines. Though, of course, the other challenge was about these 562 states, which you mentioned, and how we got these 562 states together. That was an administrative aspect. I think Sardar Patel needs, he has to get the entire credit. I mean, the entire credit, because nobody else thought about it. Nobody else thought about it. Together with VP Menon, the process of integration started. And in fact, it will be very interesting to see that, earlier there used to be the department, the political department, that became the Ministry of States. And they had organized all these states into, Punjab states and Madras states and states of the South. So getting all this together in a very short time. And one of the things was, that between 19, as long as the country was being run under the 1935 Act, it was easier to do all this. Once India would have become a republic, then changing the names of states and doing all these things, making the administrative boundaries would have been very, very difficult. Now, I'll just give you a little background to how it started. I mean, I'd gone to the Survey of India, and you've basically gone with a group of young IAS probationers to see how the land management is happening. How do you have the various survey instruments and things? So there one started looking at the maps of India. And I saw the map of India in 1796, which was then published by the Survey of Bengal. Right? So from that
This is
time,
Reynolds map, or?
this is, I forget which map it was, but it was the 1796 map, which was then published the Survey of Bengal. At that time, there was no Survey of India. It was the Survey of Bengal. And then one started looking, and I know the fact is that whenever the boundaries of the state change, the Survey of India has to come up with a new map. And I found that there were maps and maps and maps and maps. So I started, thanks to COVID, so I started collecting all these maps. And then I noticed that in 1947, from 1947 to now, there is not one state or one province whose territory has not changed, whose name has not changed, or whose nomenclature has not changed. So that set me on the journey of, looking at these various aspects. And that got me thinking that, in some cases, the changes are purely administrative. But in most cases, the change was the result of a larger political, debate, a larger political question, which immediately in 1947, Mr. Nehru wanted to put on the back burner because he was very, very affected by partition. So that was the reason why Nehru at that point of time, certainly both Nehru and Patel, they felt that we can put it on the back burner. But Gandhi, even to his very last point, he wanted the linguistic reorganization of states. And I think the strength of India is that we accepted the linguistic reorganization of states. If we had not accepted it, we could have had we have the example of Bangladesh and many other things.
Sanjeev, if I could just stop you there, not to deviate you from, one of the things that is not often noticed, that this integration of the states that Patel carried out, and valiantly, it was an impossible task, is very much a response to one of the proposals that Mountbatten put forward, of what was called Project Balkan.
Yes.
That the transfer of power would be handed over to every single royal prince separately. In other words, India would be broken up into so many different countries. And this is something that neither Nehru nor Patel or the entire Congress was willing to accept.
Yes, that is true. But
And I think that serves as a kind of a trigger or an impetus to the idea of that India has to be integrated and these royal princes have to be brought into the republic.
Absolutely, because you see, there was this movement in Calcutta. They wanted, Calcutta also wanted, the expat community of Calcutta thought it could become like another Hong Kong or Singapore. So a lot of the Travancore wanted it. So all these princes actually started with the 1935 Act. One of the things with the 1935 Act was that it is actually a foundational act of India, whether we like it or not. Many times we want to think, that we've created everything new, but the fact is that whether we like it or not, it was also a transfer of power. In fact, the reality of India is that we got our freedom, it was also a transfer of power, and it was also partition. So all these three things are important to acknowledge. So
a large part of the Constitution of India is actually a cut and paste of the Government of India Act 1935.
But I just wanted to mention one or two things here. One is that the name itself, whether we call ourselves Hindustan or India, was a major debate. And let me shed some light on this. You see, because the Britishers have always been talking about Hindustan and Pakistan. And for some time, Hindustan, Pakistan and Bengal. Because they wanted Bengal also to be an independent, undivided Bengal. Now, one of the things which VP Menon, and it was Menon the bureaucrat and Menon the, he realized that, if you were to call yourself Hindustan, then you have to renegotiate all the treaties. As India, we were the successor state to the Dominion of India, like it or not like it. It was the transfer of power from the British Dominion of India to the Indian Dominion of India, and Pakistan was a breakaway. Now, which meant that in most of our embassies, most of our missions, our membership to the League of Nations, our membership to the Indian International Olympic Association, our membership to the WHO, we did not have to apply again for that. But had we become the Dominion of Hindustan and the Dominion of Pakistan, then both applications would have to be started de novo. So I think Menon, that is why good bureaucrats are required in this country, sir. In spite of whatever you might talk, feel, you know. So this good act of bureaucratic
So he
planning
was
on his
driven
part,
by very practical
very
constraints.
practical. You know, other practical considerations, and you know, something which you know, the fact that Lakshadweep became a union territory with 50,000 people. Lakshadweep became a union territory because the communists and the PSP were winning all the seats in Kerala. And the government was really, really concerned that you might have a red flag in one of these islands which is under a communist regime. Therefore, the formation of, I mean, can you imagine Lakshadweep being made a union territory with at that time 43 or 44,000 people, sir? So the practical aspect of India, or I would say, the role which the Indian bureaucracy and the Home Ministry has played in ensuring that India remains integrated, that was also one of the aspects which I thought I need to highlight in this book. You know, another interesting episode. You know, I'll share that with you. That is about, you see, the way Goa and all these places became part of India. You see, in the case of the other two small, Chandannagar decided to become part of India without reference to the French. After that, we had an agreement with the French that, you know, the process will be gradual. Insofar as Goa is concerned, Daman, the Daman, Diu and the other places, so they decided, I mean, the RSS just moved in, RSS and the Congress just moved in, and they took over that little principality. We were in conflict with Portugal at that time. Portugal was not a member of the International Court of Justice. We fought a case with them. So the ICJ had decided that yes, Goa, Daman and Diu are, I mean, Daman and Diu are parts of Goa, but whether India gives you the right of passage or not, that is entirely up to you. So these are very interesting aspects about our own history. One of the reasons why I wrote this book, or when I thought this book is important, is that we've all looked at history from the point of view of New Delhi. Who came to power in New Delhi, what happened there, what happened then. But actually history was being made in the states. History was being made, agitations were happening. I mean, the agitation for a separate state of Bombay and Maharashtra and Gujarat, the very massive agitation that we had in Punjab. So all these are aspects which I thought have not got the due which they ought to have had. You know, so it's one of the spurs for this book.
But don't you think it's somewhat ironic that the first military engagement that the new Indian Republic or the new Indian state uh, takes part in and wins is actually within India?
Within India, yes. I mean,
That's
both
Hyderabad,
Hyderabad and Goa. I mean,
Goa.
both are,
Yeah, yeah.
and both
But
by
Hyderabad
the
first. I mean,
and both by the same general, both
same
by
gen-
the same general,
general,
General Chaudhary,
Chaudhary,
you know, same
yes.
general, same general. So this is very interesting, and it also shows that, you know, you have to have real politic in place. Without real politic, it couldn't have happened. And another thing which comes out is that the Congress and the RSS have been together on many issues.
In issues.
On the issue of Goa, on the issue of Hyderabad, on the issue of Jammu Kashmir, the Congress and the RSS have worked together. That's something which today is not fashionable to state or fashionable to accept. But the fact is that there
On
has
either
been,
side.
on either side. On either side, they don't want to accept it. But Hyderabad, for example, I mean, there was no Hyderabad Congress. Hyderabad Congress and the Hyderabad Arya Samaj and the Hyderabad, they were all the same, right? And so it's very easy today to create binaries about the past. And one of these important things which is important to recognize is that these binaries may not have been there. These binaries are being forced upon.
Yeah.
You know?
No, but talking of binaries and staying with the Hyderabad narrative for a little bit, is there is another thing going on in Hyderabad that is the very armed resistance
Yes, the
led by the Communist Party of India
Yes, at
under
that
B.T.
point.
Ranadive,
Yes.
and which is also, and under that Ranadive leadership, the slogan from 48 onwards is "Ye Azadi Jhuti hai."
Yeah, that is true.
So there's a denial of the kind of independence that India has won. And the triumph in Hyderabad, in integrating Hyderabad, is also a triumph against this denial of independence. Do you have
No,
any
I
views,
know, I agree with
any
you.
views on
No,
that?
absolutely, absolutely. Because I think, you know, this, and that again has to do with the way the Communist Party looked at most things, you know. So that is, it was very important for India to have got Hyderabad at that point of time. Very, very
That
important.
conjunction
because,
is very important.
Because you see, the fact is that the Communist Party was the second largest party.
Yes.
I mean, the Communist Party gathered a lot of votes. I mean, in Punjab, in Bengal, in Maharashtra, and in the
Kerala.
workers, Kerala. So that was a very important aspect. And if we had not recognized that, then the things could have been very, very different. But there, the credit goes to Patel, because he was able to take a decisive step. You know, unlike Mr. Nehru, who could have, thought that, it may have gone to the UN or something would have happened. But before that, what also happened was that the experience of partition changed a lot of thought processes. I mean, the experience of partition was quite brutal. One of the traumatic experience. I mean, more so in the northern part than in this, because in Bengal it came in different phases. But in Punjab, I mean, can we imagine that between, say, June and October of that year, I mean, 1 million deaths, and now, of course, Harvard study is saying that it is more than 1 million deaths, but let's not get into that controversy. It was a very traumatic experience for the country, and in that background, the getting these 562 states together, and all sorts of vague promises. Jodhpur, for instance, was being told that let's join Pakistan.
Yes.
You see, Jinnah, I mean, some of the things, which are not in public domain. I mean, Jodhpur, Bikaner, and all these places. I mean, Jinnah told them that, you sign on this check. And Jinnah, in fact, told them that if you are in India, you'll have to be under Democrats. I mean, you'll have to follow the popular rule. If you are in Pakistan, there's no question of a popular rule. You decide and do what you want to do. So at that point of time, we had to intervene, and that's how the thing came up.
Yeah.
One interesting thing which has not got a lot of currency is that in 1954, Bengal and Bihar wanted to become one state. What had happened was that in 1953, the Congress session was held in Amritsar. And when B.C. Roy came and saw the rehabilitation of Punjabi refugees in Punjab, and that area then included all the way from Gurgaon, Kurukshetra, and all these places, he felt that, unlike the Punjabis who could come and settle in an area in which they were linguistically very comfortable, ethnically very comfortable, and also had a political stake, the Bengalis, unfortunately, some were sent to Andaman, some were sent to Pilibhit, some were sent to Dandakaranya. So the Bengalis were settled in different parts, and they could not, the Bengali refugee could not get any voice. So he felt that, if we could have this area, which is now Jharkhand, and both the assemblies are on record of having passed it. The opposition came from the Communist Party of India and then from the Congress Party of UP. Because the Congress Party of UP felt that if you have a Bihar and Bengal as one state, then the permanent hegemony of UP on Indian politics would cease to exist. So I think that is also a very important aspect which has not been studied at all. And my postulation is that if Bengal and Bihar had become a bilingual state, then this entire issue of Maharashtra and Gujarati, then you could have had a bilingual state in the erstwhile Bombay presidency. We could have had a bilingual state in Punjab. Punjab, as it is, was bilingual. So it does make us understand and the 50s and 60s were actually very difficult periods. Today we say that today there is no problem about the integrity, about the borders of the country, but 50s and 60s were actually very, very difficult period. That's why it's called the most dangerous decade.
Most dangerous. Yeah, the nation state was barely 10 years old. I mean, no, but interesting you say this, because if, as you know, Nehru wrote letters every week to the chief ministers. And if you read the letters that he's writing to B.C. Roy or the previous chief ministers of West Bengal, the chief ministers are putting forward this refugee problem as a major concern.
Yes.
For not just for rehabilitation, but also for law and order, and also because these refugees are actually the seeding ground of communist popularity.
Yes.
So, and Nehru is not actually taking this concern very seriously. He is brushing it under the carpet. Now that you tell me this, I'm trying to join dots. Maybe he's being influenced by the UP Congress.
Yes, because the initial
if
part,
Bengal and Bihar come together, the hegemony will be lost.
The initial response of the Congress Party to this prospect was very good.
Yeah.
But then they changed tack.
Yeah.
The other point which comes out is, you see, that while the English press was gaga about this, the regional press was totally opposed.
Totally opposed.
The Bangla press was
Yeah.
totally opposed to this integration. The Bihar press was totally opposed to this integration. And therefore, it also shows one thing very clearly, that there is a major difference between the way English press looks at things and the local press looks at things. The other thing which comes out, Rudrangshu, is that, you see, whatever the national political party might say, the ground level workers will follow a totally different tack. Because the Congress, in fact, in the case of Bombay, the communists and the Congress, both these parties did not want the state to be. At that time, in fact, even the Jansangh didn't want. In fact, all the three parties, all the three national parties were opposed to the formation of Gujarat and Maharashtra. But the ground level reality was such that Gujarat was also made and Maharashtra was also made. And you had that, SMM movement and the Samyukt Maharashtra movement that came up. And the regional, and also the Congress realized that regional satraps are no longer under their control.
And also, since you spoke about the contrast between what was happening in the North Punjab, and what was happening in Bengal, this historian Shekhar Gupta, who is working on caste politics in Bengal, is actually showing that while genuine rehabilitation in terms of occupation, generation of income, land is happening in Punjab, Gurgaon, Haryana, places like that. In Bengal, actually, refugees are being kept in camps which are as bad as the Nazi concentration camps. The conditions there.
Yes, and let me give you my response to this. The fact is that those who came from Punjab were either the prosperous Punjabi Khatris or the landed Jat Sikhs.
Okay.
You see, there were the Chopras, Kapoors, Malhotras, Thapars on one side, who were already educated, doctors, engineers, whatever, and the landed peasantry, the Siddhus, the Sandhus, the Jats, the Pannus, people who were very prosperous there, and therefore, and they also got land. And those who were in the professions, they got jobs. Whereas the Namsudras, the caste community which came from Bengal, was the most depressed class over there. So Mr. Mondal, of course, incidentally, the first law minister of Bengal was Mr. Mondal. Mr. Mondal, Jogen Mondal. So in fact, so it's a very interesting type of period. The tragedy is that, even though I studied history at JNU, this was not part of our syllabus.
No, never taught to us.
Never taught to us. So, this is an aspect. This is a book which, when I started, I questioned myself, how did I have a master's in history? How do I call myself a graduate?
Sorry to take names, but our teacher, Bipan Chandra, believed that history emanated from Delhi and from within the headquarters of the Congress party.
So this came as a revelation. It came and I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done on the Indian states. There's a lot of work needs to be done on how, various issues came up. In fact, the second agreement there were two agreements. Instrument of accession. The instrument of accession was a fairly simple agreement that, we give you the three subjects. Now, with that, we could not have taken over the internal regime of the state. The internal regime of the states was taken over because of the merger agreements. And the merger agreements offered that privy purse as a sort of a sop. And the one good thing is, and one of the process of writing history was that there's a lovely history museum that's come up under the Statue of Unity, because that documents the entire way in which, this process started. So it's an interesting sort of take on how we look at ourselves.
This privy purse offer, you think it was conceived to counter this offer that Jinnah is making to Jodhpur, Bikaner and all that?
More than that, the privy purse offer was made because otherwise because we had moved away from the instrument. The instrument of accession only gave you defense, external affairs and telecommunication, not even finance.
Yes.
Which meant that Baroda could have its own currency, they could have had their own army, they could have had their own artillery. So the offer was that, all right, we shall give you this money, and in lieu of this, you better give over the administration of state. So the policy that was followed then was that for a very, very large state, all the 21 gun salute states, the Kashmir and the Barodas and the Hyderabad, they were, and Mysore, these were allowed to retain their name and their area. The others were either brought into, like in the case of Punjab, PEPSU, Patiala and East Punjab States Union, and the others, they came up. So that is how, the offer was made, the integration was done, and, we were able to get them together. And it's very important. And the role of the ICS, Mr. Velodi, and all these people, that is very, very significant.
So the one thing, anecdotal, but I think it's important, the linguistic organization of the states post-independence also becomes a very emotive issue.
Yes, it does
It
become a
leads to
very,
the first death by civil disobedience.
yes,
Will you
yes.
tell us that story
Yes, you
about
see,
that?
what had happened was that, in fact, my feeling is that it happened because of the insistence of Mr. C. Rajagopalachari in not accepting many things. You see, one of the things is that Mr. C. Rajagopalachari was not the popularly elected chief minister of that time Madras, you see. So Kamaraj was, of course, the most popular leader, but Kamaraj did not get that thing. In fact, had Kamaraj become the first chief minister or premier of Madras, maybe history would have been different there as well. So and between the 30s and the 40s, I mean, the linguistic assertion in Madras had become very, very strong. So when Potti Sriramalu went on hunger strike, I mean, he was not taken seriously. He was not taken seriously. And then the entire violence and everything happened. And then within one day of his death, we had to announce the formation of Andhra state. And the formation of Andhra state also meant that the announcement for the state's reorganization commission happened within immediately. There are three reports which are very widely read in our country: the SRC, the Mandal Commission report, and the Shah Commission report. But the SRC takes the cake. So the SRC was made, and then all these things happened, and then of course you had this linguistic. One more thing which is very important, which I wanted to mention, is that the SRC was in favor of large states. If SRC wanted a strong Punjab, they wanted a strong Assam. But because of the assistance of the Chief Minister of Assam that I will impose Assamese everywhere, so that led to the dismemberment of the state of Assam. So one of the arguments which I'd like to proffer is that if you insist too much on a particular language, then there is resentment. In fact, the Odisha came out of Bengal only because Bengali said that Odia is not a language, it's only a dialect. And that can be traced to the textbook sellers lobby of Bengal, of Calcutta. The first internal fight of the Congress party between Gopabandhu Das and S.N. Banerjee also took place on these lines. Because S.N. Banerjee could not really emerge, and the point that you were making, that Bengal-India connection, I mean, he could never understand that there is a very strong Odia sentiment which cannot be ignored. And that is how the Odia nationalism came up. Another thing which I would like to say and acknowledge is that we are always so critical, but the Simon Commission accepted the fact that linguistic reorganization of states has to take place. So however critical we may be however barbaric that regime may be, there was also a certain pattern which was accepted, and
There are legacies that we cannot deny.
yeah, there are legacies that we cannot deny. And the other interesting part is the quality of memoranda that was being presented to the Simon Commission. I mean, if we were to read the memoranda that was being presented to the Simon Commission, it'll beat half the cabinet notes that we write today. I mean, it was a very powerful set of argument that was being proffered this way and that way. Another thing which I wanted to share, is that the best source of writing history is actually the letters which were dispatched by the British High Commissioner and his three deputies every fortnight to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. So they would, write their fortnightly secret report, and also enclose cuttings of Hindustan Times and Times of India and Indian Express. And that, after 40 years, they've declassified the record, and they've classified the declassified records very nicely, unlike our archives, which we have to, learn from that. So that is another aspect which I think future researchers will find it much easier to work on these things.
So just taking your point about if you impose a language too strongly in an extreme case, and then there are disruptions. I mean, the classic case is the imposition of Urdu on
Yes,
East Pakistan.
on East Pakistan.
It led to the emergence of a new nation state.
Yes,
Nation state.
So I think it's very important, and I think the moment we accept, language as an important way to communicate, as an important instrument to be in politics. A lot of things get sorted out. In fact, the moment we stopped bothering about, I mean, the imposition of Hindi also in the southern states, so that resentment has actually built the Dravidian parties. I mean, had it been left optional, in fact, that is where I think that the original Congress resolution of 1930, when they decided that, Hindustani in either the Urdu script or this script, 1930. So that would have been a great solution.
It was Gandhi's idea,
It was
by the way.
Gandhi's idea, and it was a very practical idea, but sort of, in fact, language has mostly been a force which unites people. But as a Punjabi, and this is a debate which I've always had with my Bengali friends in the Bengal Cadre. They said, why isn't Punjabi, why aren't you so attached to Punjabi as a language that Bengalis are? Because in Punjab, it was a decisive force. Because whether Punjabi used to be written in Devanagari or in Shahmukhi or in Gurumukhi, this led to the division of Punjab. So for us in Punjab, I mean, language or the politics of language was a very decisive, was a very divisive phenomenon, unlike in many other parts of the country.
Yeah, so, language is a two-edged sword, in
Two-edged
other
sword.
words. It can be unifying and it can be an identifying talisman, as it were,
Yes,
and can be very divisive as well.
Do look at the most interesting thing. I mean, you see, in Northern Ireland now, in Ireland, I mean, English is spoken more than Irish. And a part which came out for the Catholic Protestant thing. And now there are more Catholics in Northern Ireland. Now there are more Catholics in Northern Ireland. So, history teaches also one thing, that history should be looked at in terms of centuries. I mean, human beings have lives in terms of decades. Nations may have lives in terms of centuries, but civilizations, I think, have a much longer connection.
You remember
and
that
that is
when-
why I feel, that the current impasse that we have with China and Tibet, I think it's a matter of 100 years, 200 years.
You remember when in 1989, Zhou Enlai was asked what he thought of the French Revolution, he said, it's too early to tell.
Too early to tell. That is true.
No, but you have served in Bengal, at the highest bureaucratic position, and you know that even within the same language,
Yes,
it can be
yes.
divisive. I mean, the great dividing line among Bengalis is those who speak Bangal Bengali
Yes.
and those who speak, quote unquote, the pure Bengali.
Pure Bengali. And that reflects into a football team.
Football teams and everything. I mean,
So-
the great sense of superiority and
Yes,
inferiority.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So, that's Shekhar.
Okay. So we have Mr. Shekhar Gupta with us now. So Shekhar, we decided to start the conversation because it was getting a bit. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, please put a big hands for
Come, why
Mr.
don't you come
Shekhar
in the middle?
Gupta.
So Shekhar, we are halfway through our conversation, so maybe Shekhar needs no introduction, and he has endorsed the book. I mean, he at least said that the book is good.
I think
Maybe
we
you
should
can-
do the first thing first.
Yeah.
Let him release the book.
Let him release the book. Yes, of course.
The most awaited moment has arrived. It's time to launch the book. I would like to request Lieutenant General Girish Kumar, the Surveyor General of India, to please come on the stage and be a part of this occasion. Lieutenant General Girish Kumar.
He was the Surveyor General who gave me access to all the maps.
I would
Otherwise,
also like to request
possible to-
Ms. Suchishma Ukil,
Suchishmita Ukil.
Suchishmita, apologies, Suchishmita Ukil from HarperCollins to please come on the stage and be a part of this occasion, this wonderful occasion, in fact.
Formally, we have not launched it. Yeah. Rudrangshu. I think come Suchishmita and come. The contribution of General Girish Kumar to this book is
A big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. We the people of the states of India. We the people of the states of Bharat. Yes. Now I would like to request Shekhar Gupta, though he doesn't need any introduction, but let me take this privilege to introduce him to everyone. He's an Indian journalist and author who is currently the editor-in-chief of The Print. He is a founder of The Print. He is a columnist for the Business Standard. He has had long stints at Indian Express and India Today. He was vice chairman of India Today Group. He is known for Walk and Talk on NTTV 24/7, National Interest in the India Today and Indian Express, Cut the Clutter and Off the Cuff. These are some of the very popular shows of him. He was awarded with Padma Bhushan in 2009 by the Government of India for his contribution in the journalism, and also elected as President of Editors Guild of India in 2018. Anticipating India is a book to his credit, published in 2014. Now I would like to request Mr. Shekhar Gupta to please continue this discussion on this book, We the People of the States of Bharat. Thank you.
I think these two eminent gentlemen were speaking already, so please resume from where you left and I will join. Please go. I'm very sorry because my flight was an hour late and then your city's traffic doesn't help. I think your city, parts of your city can compete with Bengaluru.
I hope the city competes with Bengaluru on other things. On things other than. No, we were just having a chat actually.
Yes, please resume seamlessly. रुकावट के लिए खेद है. ये हो गया. Please go ahead.
Now we can ask Shekhar. We can quiz him.
No, we were at the point where we were mutually exchanging anecdotes and views on how the language can be an identity, unifying identity, but language can also be divisive as well. And he was giving the example of Punjab, and I was giving the example of Bengal, where language is both divisive as well as a unifying subject. So that's where we were before.
So why did you say in Punjab language can be divisive?
What I said was, you see that historically, the script divided us. You see, whether it's the Shamukhi script or the Gurumukhi script or the Devanagari script, and that happened at a time when nobody knew either of these languages. I mean, the literacy rate was 10%. I mean, the voting was 10% for the Muslims and 11% for the Hindus and Sikhs, and we were fighting over a language which we did not know. In fact,
Yeah.
and so I mean the fights between the Kali Patrika and Ajit and Punjab Kesari on one side. You covered Punjab. You started your career in Punjab, and you know of the how Punjab Kesari and Akali Patrika on two extremes, not just Punjab but Hind Samachar, Punjab Kesari, Akali Patrika, Ajit. I mean the role which they played in dividing Punjab at that time, and it's only now that Punjab Kesari as Jagbani and Ajit as the Hindi Akhbar, that they are sort of getting more balance.
Well, at the same time, I would say that at least from this experience, that's an old sort of, I mean, I don't want to give respect to ideology by saying it's an ideological battle, but it's a kind of a part ideological, part religious, part linguistic battle, because
Part commercialism.
well, part commercial, but this is also goes back to the old tussle between Arya Samaj in Punjab, Arya Samaji stream, and the Akali stream, which goes right back to the 19th century, mid-19th century. And this carried on in the battles between these papers. So those of us who saw the phase of terrorism in Punjab between 1981 to 1991 or 93, that was a 12 bad years. a lot of the fire was lit by arguments between Akali Patrika and the Punjab Kesari group. And it doesn't matter in which language they were publishing. So the language used was something like Khalistani te Pakistaniya de Pithu. Uh, and the other side used to say Lale Mahashe te Lale Mahashe te Hindu te Congress de Pithu or something like that.
The language was incendiary.
Pardon me?
The language was incendiary. I mean, it was
On
really
both
provocative.
sides.
Yeah,
On both sides. Lale Mahashe te Nirankariyan de Pithu. So with Nirankaris, the trouble in Punjab started between Nirankaris and the and the
Bhindranwala
and the Bhindranwale group,
yeah.
but basically conservative Sikhs. It's the same situation that you see right now, unfortunately, between the Deras and the Akalis and the conservative Sikhs, because just like the Nirankaris, Deras are also now being seen as challenging the Sikh doctrine. But at that time, these papers played a very negative role. The language used was incendiary, and while in conversation the language was the same,
Yes,
but one, because they came from Hindi, was seen to represent the Hindus, and the others were seen to represent the Sikhs. And in between, Ajit was a little bit more moderate,
Balanced, yes.
although it was very tough to be moderate those days. People got killed, and a phase came in 91 when, if you see your from your service, Rameshandar Singh's book, he gives you, Rameshandar Singh was Deputy Commissioner of Amritsar when Operation Blue Star took place. So he's now written a very fine book, sizable book on turmoil in Punjab. And there he mentions that one year period when terrorists would actually send you their articles and their statements, and every paper had to publish them as they were. And the Tribune at one point ignored them, and no, next day they came with AK-47s to the Tribune office, and the Tribune then published them. So in that situation, Ajit still maintained its sanity. And if I may also add for for personal brownie points, among the languages in which my weekly column is translated, I am very honored to have it translated in Ajit consistently.
Okay.
So, because I do think that Punjabi audiences, I'm just honored to reach out to Punjabi audiences. And we should not think that just because everybody wants to Canada, people don't read Punjabi. Even I, because I was brought up in Punjab, I passed my class 8 there. I still read and write Gurmukhi. And I always take a Punjabi newspaper just so that I don't lose the language. But you are very right, and what you're saying about language dividing, see what's happening in Pakistan. Punjab is a humongous state, but there are 5 division lines coming up on linguistic basis in Pakistan. So there is people who speak the Jhangi, you might call it dialect here. To call it dialect in Punjab, in South Punjab, would be dangerous in Pakistan. Or Saraiki. So in fact, very often we say, I'm married to a Punjabi, very often we say, if you want to listen to real Punjabi, you have to get onto one of these Pakistani channels. So even their jokes told in Punjabi are that much cheesier. So our language changes every 50 miles. I mean, you can see in Bengal, I don't know what you said, but again, Bengali has spoken on this side, and Bengali has spoken on that side.
That's exactly what I said.
In Tamil Nadu, Tamil has spoken in our Tamil Nadu, and Tamil has spoken in Jaffna.
Yeah.
And that probably is one of the reasons that prevented the fire from spreading too far in Prabhakaran's hoary days.
So, no, Shekhar, staying with the media, there's another very interesting point that Sanjeev made. That is, in the context of the middle 1950s demand that there be a joint, Bengal and Bihar should come together. B.C. Roy made this. And he was saying, I didn't know this at all, that the English media was completely gaga over this. They said this is the best thing to be done. And the regional languages, both in Bihar and in Bengal, were completely against this idea. So one was a very Delhi-centric view, and the other was a ground reality that local reporters and local editors were portraying. Do you still think that this kind of division exists in the Indian media between the English language and the regional languages, viewpoints that completely are divergent?
Well, I think if anything, this this gulf has widened. This gulf has widened for the simple reason that the Indian language press has grown humongously over what it used to be in the times that he's talking about. And I must tell you, I was not aware of this stuff between Bihar and Bengal. I only learned from him, and that's why you must read the book, because this book tells you a lot that, see, all of us get caught in the present. We get caught in the present or the immediate past, usually when we might have regrets with the immediate past. Usne mujhe gali nikali, usne mujhe backbite kiya, right? So I keep telling people that, we pay great price for overlooking the fact, the reality that there was history before Google. And everything that's happening now started somewhere before Google. Uh, so, so what you're saying is very right. In fact, I do read a Hindi paper, at least one, and I find even their worldview is completely different. Now, it causes consternation sometimes, even in my newsroom when I might say so, but the fact is that if I see Dainik Bhaskar, it has probably on an average more space for foreign news than the Times of India, which is not much, which is maybe a full page, a little over a page. But its selection of news is very interesting. And their news sense must be good because they are the largest most read newspaper in the whole world in any language. So their view of the world is very different from our view of the world. So there is a distinction. The second thing is, it's very correct that the national press, now if you said this idea of one country, one flag, one anthem, one language, one law, one this, one uniform for police, you might find, I mean, editorialists may still be politically correct, but among English language journalists and English language readership, by and large, there is much more support for these ideas than they would be in the languages which represent the states. I mean, I think it's a ridiculous idea that all of India should have one police uniform. In any case, it can't happen unless there is a revolution, because the constitution has made this a law and order a state issue. But what you are saying is correct. If you polled the English language media users, you might be surprised that a majority would say that yes, it's a great idea for everything to be centralized. So that is more a centralized point of view. It's not a federal point of view. It's a centralized point of view. Whereas in the languages, you get a much greater sense of the states. And that's why I think that while I support the idea of more and more people learning English, but it's important that languages, Indian languages, are not made to feel inferior or second cousins. When I worked at India Today, my additional job was to look after the Indian language editions of India Today. That included Hindi, of course, but Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, where I can't tell A from B. But one thing we did there was we banned the use of the expression vernacular languages, because we said it's a pejorative. The British dreamt up this expression. This is banned. These are Indian languages. These are not vernacular languages. So even today, there are a few words that I have personal enmity with. So even when I see our opinion columnists, others, if I find vernacular somewhere, I go after this.
No, we use the word Bhashas of Bharat.
Bhashas Bharat.
Bhashas of Bharat is what the value of words we attract, celebrating diversity. Bhashas
Right.
of Bharat.
Because actually the English we speak is also
Indian.
Bhasha, is also Bhasha of Bharat. So can I tell a story, tiny story? So our former president and foreign minister, when he was foreign minister, went to the US when Clinton administration, I think the first term of the Clinton administration, and and he spoke at a meeting with the where State Department people and the CIA people, etc., were present. So when this ended, and I heard this story from Robin Raffel, who was Assistant Secretary of State, earned some notoriety in India for questioning the instrument of accession or raising doubts about it. So she told me the story of how the guy from the agency called her and said, "Hey, Robin, do these Indians have more missiles than we know of?" So she said, "No, they have the same missiles." So he said, "But their foreign minister was mentioning some missiles we haven't heard of, missiles." So she said, I explained to them that he comes from Bengal and they speak they say the same thing differently. So the guy at the agency said, hey Robin, these Indians of yours, they speak 20 dialects of English language. So, so English is also an Indian bhasha. Indian English is an Indian bhasha.
So I think with time we have to close.
Yeah.
But I would want to read
Please, I know you've
some.
got a page
Absolutely.
open for a long time.
Yeah. See, I mean, this, see, thanks to COVID, one had a lot of time in the library. Otherwise, believe you me, the director of the academy is a fairly tough job because there's so many functions, so many programs, so many things that keep happening that you do not get that time in the library. But 2 years in the library, so these are some of my observations. First and foremost is the fact that the notion of identity is fluid. And though there are binding elements that prevent it from meandering too far away from the accepted course. Language is usually a force which brings people together, but as in the case of Punjabi, the script became the divisive bone of contention. There is a considerable difference in the way pan-Indian parties and regional parties look at issues. And their perspective of looking at things is so very different because for the Akali Dal to take a position on Satluj Yamuna link canal is very easy. For the BJP or the Congress to take a view on Satluj Yamuna link canal is very, very contentious. So they just can't do it. Political parties also change their perspectives with time, as we've seen in the case of BJP and RSS now accepting smaller states. Migration affects demography, and demographics is going to change the way our politics, is operated. Sixth, the opposition to an idea can come from the most unexpected quarters. And the fact that we discussed that the English language press, the Hindi press, and the regional papers have very different points on most views, and the coverage varies. Every story has multiple perspectives, as a small case study of Sikkim shows. Because Sikkim is a very small state, but there are 4 very different, eminently readable texts on Sikkim. The first is written by Sunanda Kedatta Ray, again a journalist whom we all respect, but he wrote it from the perspective of the Chogyar. The next book came from B.S. Das, who was an administrator. The third book came from the person who was the head of RAW. He wrote it from the perspective of the Chogyar, from the perspective of the Qazi Lenduk Dorji. And the next book is written by a foreign service officer who thought that Sikkim it was actually somewhere between the India-China issue. So many different perspectives of this. And last but not the least, that, while we live our lives in decades, nation in terms of centuries, and civilizations in terms of millennia. So these are some of the, the thoughts which I had after I wrote this book.
Thank you, Sanjeev. I think this is a very, very important book, and as Shekhar said, we should all read it with a great deal of attention because we have plenty to learn from it.
See, I know that we are out of time and I'm guilty having come late, but I covered the Northeast at the height of trouble between 1981 and 83, when 4 insurgencies were on and Assam movement was so strong that not a drop of crude oil could go out of Assam. And this ended with the Nelly massacre, etc., etc. Looking back at the Northeast and looking at the conflict, it was a good practical lesson, and I'm sure Sanjeev will know a lot more about it, how language, culture, ethnicity, and statehood, the grant of statehood, was then used as an instrument to answer these separatist impulses. So Mizoram became a state of just 4 lakh people, 3.5 lakh people. and things began to get better. I think today it's a state of about 15 lakh people. That's all. It's less than a tenth of Delhi. But the same person who was earlier the leader of the Mizo National Front, who employed a general and 5 others of the rank of lieutenant general, self-styled as they were called, he became the chief minister. He put the flag of India on his car, took his oath on Indian constitution. And similarly for Nagaland, similarly for Manipur, Meghalaya, these are all states with a few million, none more than 3 million. And yet each one had a distinctive language. And what was then a separatist, ethnic, tribal impulse then was sort of smoothened and made lighter or moderated with the linguistic impulse. And indirectly, what became ethnic states also became linguistic states. In 1973, the Reorganization Act, etc., etc. So these are very interesting experiences in India, which if you see today's discourse, you will not know. And that's why you need books that bring all of this back together. And also for reference, because for reference, we can't just keep going to what my friend Asaduddin Owaisi calls Hazrat Google. So he says, आजकल के लड़के लड़की तो पढ़ के आते हैं इंजीनियरिंग कॉलेज से सीधे 8वीं क्लास के बाद दे स्टार्ट प्रिपेयरिंग फॉर इंजीनियरिंग कॉलेज ना हिस्ट्री पढ़ते ना ज्योग्राफी पढ़ते ना सोशियोलॉजी पढ़ते ना रिलीजन पढ़ते अगर मदरसे में भी जाते तब भी मौलवी बताता जिहाद क्या होता है अब जब वो एमबीए कर लेते हैं बड़ी नौकरी मिलती है तो पूछते हैं जिहाद क्या होता है कहाँ जाते हैं हजरत गूगल के पास जब वो गूगल को पूछते हैं जिहाद क्या होता है पहली एंट्री आती है लश्कर तौबा जमात दावा so it's very important to know where we have come from, how we got here. I'm sitting in Uttarakhand. How did we get here in terms of statehood? It's not something that happened yesterday. So these are things that are very important to understand, and I'm very happy that our civil servants used to write the finest books. Our generals used to write the finest books on contemporary history. And for some time, this genre had disappeared. And there, a book like this, Sanjeev, you made a great contribution.
Thank you.
And I hope more people in your services are inspired because unless you can write decent English or some decent language, I know that UPSC won't let you through. And you are good record keepers. You write your notes. It's all available. So please, I hope your lot starts rebuilding this tradition now. And this is Dehradun. So once again, the loss of the same tradition now, the armed forces. And a lot of the writing that comes out of there is really not scholarly writing of military scholarship. So I hope some of that changes as well.
Thank you, Shekhar.
Thank you, everybody. It was really very insightful exchange of ideas, isn't it? And if the panel allows me, let me say one thing. When an administrator turns an historian, it's a good combination. But when an administrator turns a geographer, it's a magical combination. That is what this book is all about. This presents a beautiful approach, a distinct approach to study your own history. So I must congratulate Dr. Sanjeev Chopra for producing such a wonderful stuff to read. Thank you very much. And now it's time to show our gratitude. So I would like to request the chair of the session, Professor Rudrangshu Mukherjee, to kindly present a token of thanks to the author of this book, Dr. Sanjeev Chopra.
We've been doing this since morning.
A big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
The best dressed also.
In fact, he is the man behind all this curation, behind all the event. So a big round of applause for Dr. Sanjeev Chopra. And now I would like to request Now I would like to request Dr. Sanjeev Chopra to present a token of thanks to the chair of the session, Dr. Rudrangshu Mukherjee, and the discussant, Mr. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you everybody for being with us. Now the other session will start in another 15 minutes. That is Iti Nritya by Kabir Academy. Thank you one and all.